Morning. Thanks for coming out today. I'm just going to make a brief opening comment or two, and then we'll open up to questions. After our off-season last year and heading into training camp in September, our expectations as an organization were to be competitive, but also try to create an environment where our young players grew and developed in a competitive environment. We thought we had a nice blend and balance of the veterans and the young guys. And in part, some of that happened, but with that said, we saw what you saw and a lot of our fans saw, and that is inconsistency in our play, and really a team that was searching for an identity much of the season. Getting to the playoffs always for a young group of guys is something that they can learn from. But with that said, we always know that that's not the goal, just getting to the playoffs. So we, Gar and I, organizationally, we understand what we're facing. We've understood it since last year when we decided to change course. And but from ownership down, we're committed to working through the issues that we face. Jerry and Michael continue to give us resources. Gar and I are committed to reshaping the roster, continuing to do that in a disciplined fashion. You know, as we've talked to Fred briefly, which we will continue to do. You know, he's obviously committed, and you know, Fred's our coach. He'll be back. Our players in our exit meetings, we got a real good feel and a good vibe from them about what they want to become as players, especially our young guys. They understand that there's an opportunity for them to show that they belong in this league and can be contributors in this league. So bottom line is we remain focused, Gar and I, on both the long term and the short term. And in the short term, we're looking at a draft coming up where we're going to add 2 young players to a group that primarily is still very young. And we understand what that entails. We're going to put a lot of resources and time into our player development this offseason and try to create a culture where they can grow and become the best players that they can. We said last year when we made a lot of these changes that this is a process. We approach it that way every day, and we're going to remain patient and disciplined as we make decisions along the way. So we'll open up to questions. Tim?
Sean Hike in The Athletic. It obviously didn't happen the other day during exit meetings, but do you ever get a chance to have your exit meeting with Rondo? And also, where are you guys at in terms of whether or not you might pick up his option for next year?
We're going to meet with Rajon this week. He had a family commitment that he wanted to go to, so that was fine. And I will say this about Rajon. You know, we're going to make those decisions down the road, but there's a good chance, a really good chance that we'll bring Rajon back, and for these reasons. As we get younger, it's still really important to have quality veterans around your young players. And to a man, our young people loved Rajon. He was great in the locker room. He was great off the court with these guys. He took them under his wing in a lot of ways, and he was responsible for a lot of the good things that came from them. So we have a lot of respect for Rajon, especially how he believes in the game. You know, he used to drag guys into the weight room, and he held them accountable in a lot of ways. So we really take a lot from him, and we're looking forward to sitting down with him this week.
Deon Miller, ABC 7. You guys said that this team was searching for an identity all season. Whose responsibility was it, or is it, to establish that identity sooner moving forward?
Well, it's all our identity. It's all our responsibility. And part of the deal this offseason will be, you know, there was too much inconsistency, obviously, in the rotations and trying to plug holes from game to game. That's stuff that we talked to Fred about during the year, and we'll continue to. Our expectation is that our young guys will have a more consistent role, more defined, consistent role. I firmly believe this thing Gar does too, that as a young player, the only way we can find anything out about them, they can find out about themselves, is to have consistency. And you know, I look back, and this is not you're never sitting here saying that your players are going to turn out to be this type of player, but you know, we had have an example on our team in our locker room. Jimmy Butler played his first year about 8 minutes a game, and What he needed was opportunity, consistent opportunity. And, he's done what players rarely do, is grow him into an all-NBA type player. So we need our young guys to get more consistent time out there on the floor, and that will happen.
Casey Johnson, Chicago Tribune. What will you guys say if Jimmy Butler seeks a full-time, long-term commitment from you guys? And how aggressively will you look at trading him this offseason?
Well, first of all, Jimmy is far and away our best player. He's all NBA type guy. He is, as I just mentioned, he's made himself into just a quality player. His work ethic, as most people know, is one of the best in the league. We talked about last year, and look, our job, you always have to keep things open. And we've told Jimmy in our exit meeting that, look, we want to get, oftentimes when the season ends, your emotions are high, they're raw, and you want to just decompress a little bit and let him decompress. We're going to sit down with Jimmy again. It's going to happen, and we're going to talk to him, and we're going to define to him, with him, our thoughts, those type of things. But that's not for today. And but we respect Jimmy, we respect his opinion, and we will sit down and talk with him.
Megan Malachy, CBS 7-2. There are some reports that there might be a change in management responsibilities. Can you address that? Is it going to be the status quo? And also maybe your brother might get more involved and you might take over, John, more of the day-to-day responsibilities. Any truth to that?
No, I'm going to make this clear. The setup we've had since Gar was named GM in 2009 has been, the hierarchy is the same. My responsibility is reporting to Jerry and Michael, primarily. Gar's responsibility is reporting to me. Now, we overlap in what we do every single day, and we work well together. It's very much like in the business world, a CEO-COO relationship. And my responsibilities lie mostly in defining the culture of what we do every day. And Gar's responsibility as a GM is in the day-to-day grind of this business, and it is a difficult job, what he has to do every day, dealing with agents and everything. So that's the way we've always handled it. And to say we feel we have a good staff, we have a very small staff, we use all our resources, and so we will continue to do so. So that's just as plain as it can be said.
John, has Dwayne given you any indication about what his plans are with the option, and what are your thoughts on him exercising that option if he chooses to go that route?
Well, we did the same thing with Dwayne in our exit meeting. We told him, and he's, we've read publicly, he's going to look to us for direction on our team and that type of stuff. He has an option in his contract that was negotiated, so he has the right to pick that up if he chooses. And a lot of was really good for us. I mean, his injury toward the end of the year hurt him. Again, we are just in the process of, as I mentioned, we sat down with the players. We went through, again, like I said, it's raw. We just lost the night before when we sat down with these guys, and you're all a little numb, and your mind, a lot of times isn't always, where you want it to be in another week or so. So again, these are things that we will discuss. And we've told Dwayne we will sit down with him again, during this off season.
John Greenberg from The Athletic. You guys gave a lot of point guards tryouts this year, a lot of young point guards. That by the end of the season, when Rondo goes down, these guys, Fred wasn't playing him; they couldn't play. Do you need to change something with scouting, or is there a different way you guys have to look at these guys? Gar, I'm
gonna let Gar.
Do you have to change the way you look at, maybe scouting some of these guys, or what you're looking for in some of these point guards?
Yeah, I don't, and there was, John mentioned, there wasn't a lot of consistency with the rotations, and guys were in and out, sometimes playing, sometimes not. And like he said, organizationally, we've got to commit, and we've committed to a roster with 10 guys with 3 years or less on the roster. In some ways, it was tough on Fred to have so many new players and to have so many young players. But these guys are going to get an opportunity to improve and to grow. It's going to be a big summer for a number of these guys. And then I think there's going to be opportunity for them moving forward where there'll be more consistency with the roster. There'll be more guys back. Guys will understand what their roles are and have an opportunity to get better. And I think that's the biggest thing we're facing right now. You know, there's several ways to get better. You can get better internally, and you can get better externally. Externally, you don't control everything. You know, if you look for opportunities on the trade market, but the other team's got to be involved, and there's different factors. The same within a draft. You know, certain players are available, certain players aren't. But internally, for us to get better, we control that, and that's an area that's going to be a huge emphasis in that we have a number of young players. I think a number of them showed signs of improvement, but they were inconsistent. They weren't consistent on a daily basis, and we need them to improve and get better, and that's going to be a focus of ours.
David Hoff from the Tribune. John, how much discussion was there about Fred Hoiberg coming back, and did you include Fred in that in terms of, like, was he eager to come back? Does he want to come back? How committed he was to coming back? And also, how do you respond to some of the perception that this roster wasn't a great fit for the offensive system that he ran?
Well, you know, first of all, in regards to Fred, we just sat down with him briefly. He got out of town. You know, he's still out of town right now. And again, it goes back to you want to clear your head, so we will have those discussions. But look, it's fair to say that you know, when you look at our team, we do not have great shooting. We know that is something we have to continue to be on the lookout for. Outside of Rondo, our point guards did not play with push and pace the way Fred wants to play. So yes, we have to continue to look at the style he wants to play and look at players that fit that. We've done, you know, last year we maybe did plug some holes and do some patchwork stuff that did not turn out. And again, that's, you know, that's a responsibility. But with that said, you know, when, Gar and I were talking earlier, you know, as disjointed as the season was, the team ended up winning 7 of the last 9 in those 2 games against Boston when Rajon was healthy. I mean, we were playing our best basketball of the year, and it's not an excuse. Rajon goes down and we fall, you know, we didn't have the support system behind him to help us win that series. So, you know, I mean, we can sit here and say we might have been still playing, but it didn't happen. But your point is a fair one, that we need. We had no discussion. We knew Fred was coming back. Fred's our coach, and we have to continue to support him. We have to continue to give him the resources he needs to be successful, and that's on us. And we're going to continue. That's what we're diving into every day now. That's our responsibility, and we'll do it.
Casey Johnson with the Tribune. Getting back to the hierarchy for a second, guys. You guys have obviously been working together for a very long time, and I know in the big decisions you guys have a collaborative style and try to talk through getting to an organizational consensus. When you two specifically differ on an issue, who wins?
Who wins? It's not about winning. Here's how. In my role as EVP, I always have the ability to say yes or no. It's that simple.
And following up on that, John, you mentioned that you report to Jerry and Michael. Gar, who do you report to?
Well, to John, Jerry, and Michael, you know, and as you noted, I mean, really, I think in any corporate type setting, you know, we want to be process oriented in everything we do. We want to make sure we've covered all our bases, crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and you know, I'd say 99% of the time, if you've put in the work and you've been detailed in the work, the answer is usually pretty clear. But when John and myself and Jerry and Michael get in a room, we digest all the information, and I would say a majority of the time, the answer is crystal clear.
John, Nico Mirotic, I believe, is a restricted free agent. You talked about consistency. When he's good, he's really good. When he's not, he's just obviously not. What are your viewpoints on him previous to now and going forward?
Yeah, Gar, I'm going to let Gar talk a little bit about personnel stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we obviously Nico had an up and down year, and he would be the first to tell you that he was disappointed that he wasn't more consistent, and as were we at times. But in saying that, we value Nico, and I think John talked about we need to continue to get better shooting the basketball, and even analytically, it showed when Nico was on the floor with certain lineups and when Nico was on the floor with Jimmy, we were much more effective. And he finished season strong in March, was up and down then in April and into the playoffs. But we value Nico, and we see him as a 25-year-old 6'10" guy that can shoot. He's got to get better in certain areas. We had a really good conversation with him on Saturday. As we talked to him, Nico made it clear he wants to be in Chicago, that he's comfortable here, that his family's comfortable here. We made it clear that we would like for him to be in Chicago. So with that said, when those things align, you hope you can get something done when July 1st comes. But you don't know what's going to happen within the market, and those will be decisions we have to make as we go. But we certainly would hope that Nico would be back with us.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say about Nico is that, and it's a dilemma around the league, but, the international players that you have on your roster, oftentimes they spend their summers with their national team. And Nico had a great experience doing that last year and winning the bronze medal. But in reality, from our seat, he lost some time in the weight room with us, on the floor with our coaches. And it's interesting, too, some of the statistics we look at with Nico. In his 3 years here, he's been statistically much, much better after the All-Star break. So we look at that and we try to analyze that. And our hope is that, like Gar said, we want him back. We hope to work something out, but we also hope he'll be here all summer long working. And we hope that statistically what he's done over after the All-Star break, these first 3 years, that he can do more consistently. Because let's face it, this game, you need floor spacers and shooters, and when he's playing that role, he does help our basketball team.
Yeah, I was going to add, you got asked the question in regards to improving our shooting and playing more to Fred's style of play and how he wants to play. I do think after we made the trade and Nico had a consistent role and Bobby had a consistent role where they could space the floor, I think we saw some improvement with our team, which was something obviously we evaluate and we're encouraged by, going into the summer.
Cheryl Raystout with WBEZ Radio. Gentlemen, when you look at what Fred has for resources, are you talking about any time of changes or additions with the coaching staff?
Cheryl, we're in the process right now of looking at everything. And so that can't be answered today, but we want to get the entire staff back in town. Again, it's been 5 days since we lost and the season ended. They've been out of town. We want to get them back, and we want to sit down and having some real face-to-face, tough discussions, and which will happen. Our responsibility always is to look for areas of improvement. And we've mentioned, the player development component. I mean, these are all things we are currently, they're at the top of our list that we're, because we understand that, like I said earlier, we have the young guys on our roster now that are unproven. We're going to add 2 more in this draft, and we need that. That's the most important thing. So we are looking at it from the viewpoint that we have to make sure that the people around Fred are the ones that can help develop our young players, and that's on us to do going forward.
Vince Goodwell, CSN. Gar, you frequently mention 10 players with 3 years or less of experience, and you talk about developing those guys. Is that realistic to be able to develop that many guys while having a few veterans on the team while still trying to win? It seems like those are like conflicting agendas. Would it be better to just pick out 3 or 4 young players to invest in and try to develop those guys as opposed to 10?
Well, that's the process we'll go through, but we wanted to get younger, and like I said, now it's those players are going to be in the gym. They've each committed to being here all summer and putting in the work, and being with our strength and conditioning coaches, being with our coaches on skill development, and those are decisions we'll have to make. To say that all those players will be back with us, we'll have meetings and we'll have decisions to make. But we certainly feel we've got a young core of players that has a chance to get better, and we're going to need to add to it. Are we good enough right now where we want to be? Obviously not. We were 41-41. We're a 500 team. But we'll need to continue to add to those players. So those are decisions we'll make as time goes and looking at opportunities that present themselves.
Dave Kerner, WBBM Radio. John, you talk about reshaping the roster. Where would you say that level is now, say, from a year ago? That you need to do more of it, less of it? Where do you think you're at?
It's these things are always fluid, but we need long term. We need to add to our shooting component, obviously, and our athleticism. And sometimes when you're drafting where we draft, it's hard to get what you those type of things. But that's what we're on the lookout for. And the reshaping began last year. The young guys that we have drafted and acquired, that's part of this deal. So, look, we decided a year ago that we were going to try to remain competitive while getting younger, and we didn't expect. We knew there'd be a lot of bumps in the road and pains along the way. That's a difficult thing to do, but the alternative at that time was, you just blow it all up, and you guys have seen around the league. Oftentimes, the teams that do that, it's 6, 8, 10 years that they don't even get back in the playoffs. So you have to be a little bit lucky. You have to draft well, all those things, and the year you draft, sometimes it has to hit for you. But I can't underscore some of the positive, for example, of Rondo being with our young guys. That was inside our building, we understand how important that was. It started last summer when he started hanging out with our guys in summer league and that type of thing. And to be very candid with you, when we had that little incident where Dwayne and Jimmy spoke up in January, Rajon, when he stood up for our young guys, that empowered them a little bit. And that probably was a moment that we can point to and say there was some growth. It might have been small, but there was some growth with these young guys because they felt they had a voice as a young player, and for us that was important. We need to keep trying to find ways to, look, none of us, Gar and I, when we draft players and we scout them, we look at upside and ceiling and all those type of things. These kids, we're not sure yet, but that's part of the process of development. And we're in a business, basketball, where, we draft a lot of these kids so young. Our minor league system isn't a system like baseball where you can throw them down there for 2-3 years and then bring them up. We have to try to develop them quickly and see what we have. And that's why, the consistent message we're giving you is player development is important for us. And we need to find out what we have. We need to find out what these young kids can be.
Guys, Nick Friedel, ESPN. Specifically in regard to Fred, what have you seen in the last 2 years that leads you to believe that he is the right long-term fit to coach this team?
Well, look, Nick, we made a commitment to Fred. And like when David asked the question about have we given him the things, maybe we haven't. I will point to, you guys were there when Dwayne left the other day, and Dwayne said some positive things about Fred, that he saw growth in Fred. And I mentioned to you last year that I view young coaches in this league as like young players. They have to develop and grow too. And I'm not going to get into specifics about things we've seen. We have a lot of discussions with Fred throughout the year and about issues we have, things with him. But that's for us internally to have and to talk about. But I do believe that, and I think Fred's challenge this offseason is to find ways to be, a better leader. I think he showed progress in that area. The team did rally around him at times, and but again, that's part of the process too. And we made the commitment to him. We support him, and we're in this with him, and that's how an organization has to work.
John, Rick Morrissey from the Sun-Times. I'm not hearing a whole lot in terms of change here. And I guess after a 41-41 season, maybe I thought there would be. What is it about this group that makes you want to stay the course so much?
Well, here's the deal, Rick. We have a lot of guys under contract currently, okay? And the landscape is such that, to make significant change right now will be difficult. So from that perspective, to think that we can just upend massively move pieces and parts is not realistic. It's not. We have guys signed to contracts, and we made the statement last year. We were investing in the young guys. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's the truth. We have had we brought in, there's 5 young kids on our roster right now, 2 that we're going to add, and so we want to see what they can become. And it's not about what leads us to believe we don't need change. We know change is a part of this, but we don't want to change without knowing exactly what we have. And I don't feel that we've given our young kids a chance to see. And if, again, we know we're on the line for that. That's, if players develop, don't develop, that's, we scouted them, we drafted them, we've traded for them. That's part of the job. But we have to give them an opportunity.
Can I add to
Yeah.
that? Rick, the other thing is, I think when we look, we've got to take not only this year, but a big picture view of where we're at. And I know a lot of fans don't want to talk about cap situations and spikes and where we're at in managing that. But I do think we're setting ourselves up from a cap standpoint to take advantage of opportunities, whether those opportunities are this summer or next year or when they come about. That's part of our job, is to set ourselves up in order to do so. So it's what I talked about. Internally, we've got to we control that as far as continuing to grow and develop. Externally, we've got to position ourselves when opportunities arise to be in a position to take advantage. And that's part of our thinking, is that we're going to put ourselves in a position to affect change as we move forward. When that is, we don't control exactly who that is and when that is, but you've got to position yourself for that.
This question for either of you guys. You talk about how difficult it is to affect this change. I think people understand that. We've seen it, different parts of town and different teams. Why not just take that leap and Jerry's a pretty loyal owner. Just take the leap and say we're either going to rebuild around Jimmy with shooters or just totally blow it up and start something new.
Well, we have those discussions all the time, but the opportunity has to be right. To just blow it up, for example, if we don't get something in return that puts us in a position to really move forward, then you can't do that. You can't do that. But again, we're going to look at the Jimmy component we've talked about. But ideally, in this type of system that Fred wants to run, we need to play with pace and push. And Jimmy's a different player than some of these other guys. He has the ball in his hands a lot too. So, and honestly, there was a stretch of games late in the year where he had some big assist games. We understand that. We know his value. But to say just blow it up when you don't have some certainty that this is really you taking a major step positively in terms of young people, young players that you have, that's a tough one to do. It's a really tough one to do. It's easy to say, but it's tough to do.
And the other thing we've talked about, John, is in going younger, having a younger roster, is that we wanted some veterans around them to create a culture where they learn how to prepare, they learn how to practice, they learn how to work, they experience, being competitive as opposed to, totally tanking. I think you've seen teams in the past that have done that. You go to, 14, 15 guys that are in their early 20s, and like John mentioned earlier, it's a lot of times you learn how to lose and learn how to not to do things. And I think we wanted, and that's where I think Rajon and Dwayne were a real plus for these young guys on the practice floor, in the locker room.
And Robin Lopez, too.
And Robin Lopez. So we talked about that a year ago, and I think, you know, we continue to say, you know, we want some veteran leadership around these guys in order to help them continue to grow and develop.
SamSmithBulls.com.
Hi, Sam.
I have a question similar to some of what's asked, but you know, being older, it took me a while to get up, get in turn. But given you, John, you had mentioned about I don't remember the exact wording about bringing Rondo back, but feeling positive about that. And then Wade's circumstances that you presumably won't know until June 30th about whether he wants to return or not, but it seems fairly likely that he might. Are you basically hamstrung this season, you know, this off season with the roster you have? Hamstrung, not a negative, but this is, you know, because of Rondo, if he comes back with his money, Wade with his money, and Lopez, and also young players who are under contract. Essentially, is it likely to be a similar roster for those reasons?
It could be, yeah. And, you know, Gar can speak to the, you know, flexibility we might have if we didn't have somebody back. But I think the important thing he just mentioned was, you know, these vets have been good for our young guys. And the one thing, you know, when we made the deals last year with Rajon and Dwayne, in our mind, you know, as we look at the whole landscape and the teams that are out there signing guys, we felt those were short-term deals and that they weren't going to hamstring us going forward. Again, we look out a year, 2 years, 3 years out. And other teams last year dove into the market when the spike hit and signed guys to 4-year deals, and we've not done that. So we feel pretty good about the fact that you know, we haven't hamstrung ourselves, if that's the word you want to use, to any real long-term veteran deals, and that will give us an opportunity going forward.
I mean, some of that, Sam, will depend on the free agents that we have on the roster, and we've got, you know, several. We talked about Nico, Cristiano Felicio. We've got other guys, and some of that will affect that. But again, in looking at the big picture, you know, and I don't want to get too in depth as far as the cap, but we saw the huge spike a year ago, and we're seeing another spike this year where, you know, last summer there were 20, 25 teams with cap room. This summer there's still a number of teams with room. And it's our feeling, if you look where this is going, that the market is going to flatten and in some ways close. And when that time comes, if you've got a level of flexibility, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities where we won't be hamstrung and feel we'll be in an advantageous situation. And those are the things we look at, not only this year, but looking 2, 3, 4 years down the line, is making sure we're in a position where we can take advantage of opportunities as they arise.
You guys have talked a lot about the development of the young players. How did you two view Cameron Payne's minutes while he was getting them in the regular season? And also, did you guys have a reaction or feeling to Fred basically playing rotation roulette at point guard in the playoffs and Denzel Valentine still not getting a shot out there?
Well, Cameron, you know, and I think we talked about it. I think, John, you even talked about it, the trade deadline. He's was a guy we really, really were high on coming out of college at Murray State. And he came out, you know, young as a sophomore. And so we saw an opportunity, you know, when we traded for him to get a young point guard that we think has got potential. He was hurt a lot of this year with a foot injury at Oklahoma City, so he hadn't played. And when he came in, realistically, our expectations weren't very high this year. It was more, you know, we're getting a player that we have under a rookie scale contract, so we've got him under team control for several years, and, you know, as a guy we could develop and look forward to in the future.
But I think it also speaks to the fact that we understand that position is important. Look, we took early in the year we made a deal and we took a flyer on Michael Carter-Williams, and look that Gar and I talk about this all the time. That's as important a position in our game today as any. The guys that can play downhill and play with some speed and quickness. You're looking at during the playoffs right now. Look what Isaiah Thomas did last night. Those guys that can play quick and downhill. The point guard position with the rules now where you can't touch a guy out on the perimeter. So we're trying to find, you know, that type of thing. And so, you know, when we made that deal, it was, again, we understand the importance of that position, and so sometimes you take some chances trying to find a guy that fits. The one thing I'll tell you too is, you know, Cameron understands what's expected of him this offseason, and we laid it out very clearly to him. And I think the first thing for him, you know, he's a guy that really hasn't played much in 2 years. He has to get himself in shape, and he has to. It's the only way he's going to show us what he has as a player. And that's not to put pressure on him, because we think the kid has some ability. But again, that speaks to everything we're talking about here today. Our young guys need a consistent role, and that is the goal going forward. And that's how we will work with Fred together to make sure that happens. And I am convinced that we will not see those type of inconsistencies in lineups and things like that. You have to understand, you have to give your coach some freedom. I mean, we don't coach the team, okay? We hired him for his, we think Fred is a creative offensive mind, and we understood the way he wants to play. It goes back to some of the questions earlier. But, you know, we need to give him, we have to give him leeway. That's what you do with a coach. But this offseason, all of us understand the importance of finding out about these young guys. I personally would hate to move a young guy without knowing, you know, that would be the worst thing we could do. So again, it goes back to, we have to find out and see what they are. If their ceiling's high, they'll play to it. If it's not, you know, maybe get a consistent role player. But that's what we have to find out.
Guys, I'm sure you guys know what's going on in Indiana with the Paul George situation, the decision that they're having to face. It seems like you're approaching that type of situation with Jimmy as possibly as early as next season. Usually when you have a top 10 player, top 15 player, you're building around him with veterans. You guys seem to be going the other way. Is there a risk of another January-like situation happening where it's the veterans who want to win now having conflict with the young guys who are trying to develop again? And if so, how does next season look any different than this season with that?
Well, you know, those guys, when we signed them last year, we talked. They understood what they were coming to. We didn't. I mean, those were the two veteran signings we'd had. We already made the deal for Robin, so they understood what the deal was, and we have not. And again, we haven't altered from that course. So, you know, like I said, Dwayne has an option. And we're going to sit down with him. And we'll talk to him about all of this as well. And the thing with Jimmy is, you know, it's all of us would love to go out and get another superstar player, you know, to go along with him. But you know, right now the situation we're in with the salaries we have and that type of thing, you know, I mean, that's a difficult thing for us to manage. I respect very much Jimmy Butler's professionalism and how he goes about his job. And I think the one thing that we will continue to do is communicate with him. Like I said earlier, we'll sit down and talk to him. We can say anything to him. He can say anything to us. He can ask us any question he wants, and we'll be honest with him. So, look, that's a responsibility for us to do. He's our best player. Ultimately, Gar and I are always going to continue to do what we think we have to do from our seat.
Mark Shanowski, CSN. In regard to the draft, you guys really haven't hit big since Jimmy back in 2011. In terms of looking at the way you scout guys, the way you stack your board, will you start to value athleticism and potential maybe a little more over college production, because it seems that's the way the league is trending with young athletes who have a high ceiling?
I think, Mark, we take all those things into account, you know, and our philosophy has been, you know, we're going to draft who we feel the best player on the board is at that time. And we take, you know, from physical tools to their skill level to their ceiling to, you know, obviously background work. I mean, all those things are taken into account, and we take who we feel the best player is. So we're still, you know, they're young and they've been inconsistent, but, you know, we still feel, we think Bobby Portis made some real strides this year. Especially after he got a consistent role after we made the trade. We still think Denzel's got a chance to be a very good player. He had a rough year, you know, in regards to he got hurt in camp. He misses all the training camp. He doesn't really have a role. Then he gets an opportunity. He showed some signs, but it was inconsistent. That's what we're talking about. We need him to continue to grow and get better. Paul Zipser, Felicio, I mean, these young guys, we think still they've got to get better. They've got to grow, and they've got to get better. Nico, though, like we talked about, has been up and down, is still a young player and has shown signs that he's a real fit to how we play. So to answer your question is, that's something we take into consideration. We take everything into consideration. I've got a lot of confidence in how we go about our scouting process and our veteran scouting staff. And, you know, we all know that drafts, there's going to be some hits and some misses. But we feel good about some of these young guys that are on our roster, and obviously some of the guys previously. You mentioned Jimmy and some of the guys that had come before that.
Great, thank you.